just show that it is recording. Fabulous. So I'll give you a quick introduction and then we'll kick off. So just, yeah, so if you can press it in like that so you're live. Now just press it up there and I'll give you a little introduction of the other one. It takes a few minutes to go, so that's fine. Yeah, just leave it on. Perfect. Great.
Okay, our next speaker is John Peters, and this talk is given on behalf of John Peters and Kitty Barry. Now, John, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and about Kitty Barry and just where your background is from?
Okay. Hello. I'm recently qualified as a secondary school teacher, and my grandmother completed this journal for the Gleason family for the Borrissoleigh historical journey from 2012, and we've just adapted the story for today's presentation. So it speaks about the Gleason family from Fishmoy in Borrissoleigh and how they moved from Borrissoleigh to the Papal Brigade in Italy, to the American Civil War, and then eventually one of them ended up as the last mayor of Long Island.
Great. So please give a warm welcome to John Peters.
Okay, sorry. So the early life of the Gleason family, they lived in Fishmoy in Borrissoleigh, a couple of miles from here towards Thurles. Their father Michael was a farmer and a meal flour dealer. The mother was Mary Hassett. There was 8 sons: Timothy, John, Thomas, Patrick and Philip. Patrick and Philip were the twins. Michael, Joseph and Edmund. Who we're going to hear about today is John, Patrick and Joseph. 3 of the sons entered as the privates, those 3 sons, and they rose to the ranks of officers in the United States Army. Patrick Battleaxe became the last mayor of Long Island before it was subsumed into Greater New York. And Father Michael Kennedy, a Jesuit priest, attributed the Gleason's high achievement to their schooling in Borrissoleigh. Okay, so firstly the Papal Brigade. So on the left there we have Pope Pius IX, who was the Pope at the time of the Papal Brigade. On the right is Giuseppe Garibaldi, who was the main man behind Italian nationalism. And down here you have the medal, the Order of St. Gregory, which the Irish would have received when serving in the Papal Brigade. To get access to Italy, they had to pose as railroad workers, many of them. And to get recommendations for passports, the local priests would have provided recommendations. And this is a scene from the Battle of Castel Fidardo, where 2 of the Gleasons were involved, and there was roughly 39,000 on the side of the Italians, the Kingdom of Sardinia, and on the other, on the papal side, you would have had Austrian, Italian, Swiss, French, and Irish volunteers. This was one of the major defeats for the Papal Army, and afterwards, the Irish, such as the Gleasons, were sent home back to Borrissoleigh and Tipperary. And this is just a little poster on the British reaction to the Pope's Brigade. So I'll just read it out to you there. For bigotry and ignorance to fight, to occupy and guard each papal town, to save his holiness from shameful flight, and with oppression keep his subjects down. The Pope seeks volunteers from every region, and thus intends to name his fighting chaps, foreign oppressive occupation legions, whose initials are on their caps. So I don't think you can make it out, but it says fool on all of the gentlemen's caps. So because they were serving the Pope. And then the Gleason involvement in the Papal Brigade. So John Hassett Gleason resigned his position with the Dublin Metropolitan Police, and on the 11th of June 1860 he left Borrissoleigh along with 60 other men to fight for the Pope. We know that there was 29 applications for passports from Borrissoleigh and 21 from the nearby parish of Drum. Joseph Gleason, the younger brother, also joined, although he was barely 16 at the time. And what's remarkable about these men is that they all left jobs. They weren't unemployed, so they left jobs because of their faith to fight for the Pope. From an ideological point of view, Irish people would be more on the side of Garibaldi fighting for Italian freedom, the rights of nations. But because of their deep faith, they went out and fought for the Pope. So then John Hassett Gleason was known as Big Jack, and he needed a custom-made uniform while he served in the armies. According to one source, he was 6'5.5" tall. So he honourably served in the Papal Brigade from 1860 to 61. So like I said, he would have been involved in the Battle of Castelfidardo. And due to his involvement in the Papal Brigade, he was recruited by Bishop John Hughes on behalf of the New York Governor Edwin D. Morgan to fight for the Unionist cause. For the Union cause in the American Civil War. He first served as a private in the 69th New York Volunteer Infantry, which was headed by Thomas Francis Meagher. So some of you might know him as the first man to fly the Irish tricolour. So there he would have been influenced by the Nationalists. Later he joined the 63rd State Militia, rising to Lieutenant Colonel in the regiment. And on the 13th of March 1865 he was breveted Brigadier General and Major General for gallant and meritorious services during the war. So he was a quite astute and adept soldier. This is just a picture of the officers from the 63rd New York Volunteers. Okay. And as I said, while he served in the 69th, he would have been influenced by the New York State Militia under Thomas Francis Meagher. So when these men returned back to Tipperary, they began spreading the Fenianism. So Fenianism and the Gleasons. So John Big Jack was in the leadership of spreading Fenianism throughout the Army of the Potomac. The Army of the Potomac was the major Union army in the east of America at the time. And what happened was the Fenians had a network which would spread the Fenianism ideology amongst the officer class in the American Union Army. The circle within the army was in direct contact with John O'Mahony, known as the Hound of the Galties, and Captain Joseph Gleeson of the 63rd, John's younger brother, was also sworn into the circle in 1863. So after this, Joseph returned to Borrissoleigh, and he was taken into custody in Thurles in 1866 by Constable Ferns for a charge of Fenianism. And this quote is taken from the Tipperary Free Press. Since he's returned to this country, it is supposed he was inculcating Fenian principles. He was travelling about, attending races, fairs and markets. And the father of the Gleasons, Michael, was also taken into custody. As it says here, Michael Gleason, father of General Gleason, was brought before the bench for boasting in public that he was the father of 7 rebels. Timothy, one of them, was arrested in Ballymackey near Nina. So that's just the Fenian connection and the Papal Brigade and the Gleasons. So after his charge of Fenianism, Big Jack returned to America. He got unsuccessfully involved in politics and failed to get the nomination as a Democrat, as a candidate for Congress for New York. He was given the government job in the printing press where he worked out his days. And he died on the 30th of June 1889 and is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. You can see the headstone there. It's erected by P.J. Gleason, his brother. So you can look that up if you want to see his headstone today. So Patrick Jerome Gleason is our battle axe. So he arrived in 1862 to America and enlisted in the 99th New York Volunteers. And he was soon transferred to the 63rd to be with his brothers Joseph and John. He was active in the Peninsula Campaign, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, the Siege of Petersburg, and the final pursuit of Lee's army to Appomattox. He married Isabel Bennett in 1880, and she gave birth to Jessie, but she died unfortunately a couple of months later in 1883. This is just a picture of General Lee surrendering at Appomattox to Ulysses Grant. So the Gleason brothers would have been present at that. Now, his business activities. So after the war, PJ managed a distillery in Flushing in New York for a number of years. He then went on to edit the Long Island City News. He later then moved to San Francisco where he opened a distillery, and after a while he sold his distillery at a profit. He then successfully invested his stock into the market. He then returns back to Long Island in 1873 and he builds a horse car line connecting Long Island to Calvary Cemetery. He had an interest in Astoria and Hunters Point Railroad, which he sold to William Steinway, who owned a rival streetcar line. He also built an electric power station improved his trolley line, and invested in a waterworks after his defeat to Horatio Stanford. He had the first electric streetcar in Long Island City. And it's also come to light that Patrick himself was a boxer, and while in Long Island he promoted boxing up until it was legalised in 1896. So we just hope that his boxers were more successful than the Irish at the Olympics in the last few weeks. This is just a picture of a streetcar line, so one that P.J. Gleason would have owned and ran from Long Island to Calvary Cemetery. So his political career, the picture there on the top right, is when he ran in 1896 for the mayor of the whole of New York when it was subsumed as one. So first, in 1881, he was elected as alderman as a regular Democrat, and soon after he became the president of the board of the aldermen. So the regular Democrats were the ones who favoured the old machine-style politics, whereas the independent Democrats wanted a political reform. And the position of alderman is similar to a county councillor here in Ireland. So being the president, he had more access to the areas of the city's government, which benefited his various business interests. And as I said, there was a division amongst the regular Democrats and the independent Democrats. And his first clash came with George Petty, who was the Long Island mayor and an independent Democrat. And he unsuccessfully ran against him for mayor. In 1885, he was elected as the alderman at large, and in 1886, he was elected as an independent, but he refused to give up his position of alderman at large when asked. So on the one hand, he was the alderman at large and had a role in the policy and legislation, and as the mayor, he could accept or reject policy or legislation. So he had this dual status. Okay, so this is just a campaign poster. So capable, honest, fearless, friend of school children, champion of people's rights. So you can see P.J. Gleason there on the bottom. Yeah, so as I said, he had this unique position and there was no law that entitled him to give up the position of alderman, so he was able to look at the legislation before passing or vetoing it. He presented himself as a champion of the common people, and he, according to one source, he held court in a barber's chair outside of the Miller Hotel with constituent and passerby. So he'd sit on a barber chair in Long Island, and anybody who walked past, he'd hold counsel with them and instructed everybody to call him Paddy instead of Mayor. So after he was defeated in 1889 by Horatio Meagher, he goes back to business and he returns again in 1895 and runs as a regular Democrat, where he wins as a small margin. And at the time he was challenged after the election on the grounds that he was not a naturalised citizen. However, he was an astute politician and outmanoeuvred those trying to unseat him. However astute he was, he met his match and nemesis in the moral zealot, Anthony Comstock. So I'm going to talk about their clash now. So Battle Axe versus the Assassin of Joy. So the man on our right is Anthony Comstock. And the crest here is the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice. So you can see there, this man is burning the books, and this man here is leading somebody away. So P.J. Gleason, while running his streetcar lines, would have ran several gambling operations, as people would have been sitting in the streets for a significant amount of time waiting for streetcars to pass by. So he saw it as a business opportunity while they were waiting. So he's very astute. However, Anthony Comstock got wind of him and went to take him apart, as we'll see. So, as I've mentioned, during the period, bribes and graft were commonplace. Liquor and gambling was rife in the city of Long Island and the greater country. So this assassin of joy, Anthony Comstock, arose, and the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice, and they had their sights firmly fixed on Battle Axe P.J. Gleason. So just a small bit on the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice. They were founded in 1873 alongside members of the YMCA, and they were a private group of Moral Crusaders. However, they were granted powers similar to a law enforcement agency, including search, seizure and arrest, often rightly accused of entrapment for their perception of individuals. So in a lot of cases they might go to a bookshop and ask could they get a copy of James Joyce's Ulysses, which was later banned, and the book teller would tell them, no, we can't get that. However, if they kept saying, oh, just the one, as soon as the book was got, they were brought in and charged, and the bookshop was closed. And according to one internet source, they're credited with burning roughly 4 million books. Okay, so Comstock had to be very astute in his raid on battle axe. So he began investigating the streetcar lines, and he heard how gambling was commonplace while the clients waited for streetcars. So first of all, Comstock had his agents provide surveillance on the gambling taking place on one of Gleason's streetcar stops. And as I mentioned, the line went to Calvary Cemetery. So in July 1896, Comstock, along with 10 of his zealots, disguised themselves as mourners heading towards Calvary Cemetery on Gleason's line. Comstock's men then raided 4 locations, including his own private office on Front Street, and a significant amount of gambling equipment and cash was seized. The New York Times was strongly anti-Irish at the time, and in particular anti-Gleason, and they reported that Comstock had delivered the knockout blow to the rackets in Long Island City and to Gleason personally. So a bit on Battle Axe's legacy, so how his name originated. So as I said, he owned the streetcar ferry line between Long Island City and Calvary, and on one occasion the railroad decided to block traffic from his ferry line, and he decided to show them how tough he was, and he personally chopped down the barricade erected by the railroad, so that earned him the nickname Battle Axe. Gleasonville, a former neighbourhood in Woodsville, Queens, is named after him. He died in 1901, and hundreds lined the route for his interment. He's remembered as a friend of the common people in Long Island. PSI High School was the largest high school in Long Island, was built and funded by him, and is a legacy of his to the children of Long Island. So this is a picture of the high school today. So that was commissioned by him. So it's the legacy left by him. And this is his headstone here. The daughter on top, Jessie Gleason, Morgan, Patrick Jerome Gleason, and Isabel B. Gleason. And this is where his private office would have been. It's modern day 2nd Street in Long Island City, and it was known back then as Front Street. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. Questions for John? The Gleasons in New York, the Gleasons in Long Island, Battle Axe Gleason. We have a question. Yeah. Let me come down to you with the microphone so we can all hear. Here you go.
Just remember, Teddy Gleason was the president of the International Longshoremen's Association, and it was a very, very powerful position up to the 1970s. He would have died around 1980. He was the Grand Marshal of the parade, but they spelled it G-L-E-A-S-O-N. His brother in Philadelphia, when they came, or their grandparents came, his name was spelled G-L-E-E-S-O-N, and they were split or something. Nobody know anything about them? Okay. Just a question.
Have a response here.
Thanks, John. I just the two partners who fought for the Papal Armies, one was Joseph, who was the second one? Was it John or Patrick? It was John. And just more generally, it's fascinating. What your main sources of information?
Yeah, the main sources, well, my grandmother's journal from the Borrissoleigh 2012 Historical Society, and I actually forgot to mention John Augustus O'Shea, a Nina man, a nephew of Peter Gill, another man who owned the Tipperary Advocate newspaper, which was based in Nina. John Augustus O'Shea wrote an account on the Irish trip to fight for the Papal Army. So the Tipperary Historical Journal has a number of articles on it. It's been concised down to 8,000 words. It was originally 30,000 words.
something like that, so they were concise down. But the Tipperary historical journalist, Des Renanis, wrote 2 articles on the brigade. Yeah.
We have another question down here.
Just a question on the spelling of the name. Were they 2 Gleasons when they were in Ireland and they changed it to 1 EA in America?
Yeah, as far as we're aware, there were 2 E's in Ireland. Then when they went to America, the A got added and the Glee got the A got added and the E got removed. So phonetically, yeah. Dissertation will tell you more on it. Yeah.
At least by any other name would smell as sweet. Great. Well, a big thank you to John Peters and Kitty Barry. We're going to crack on because we had a late coffee break earlier on. We're just going to crack on with the next presentation.